My name is Verona Ellis. I'm 30 years old, currently living in New York and working as a risk manager for an investment firm. It's been 6 years since I last returned to Texas. No calls, no messages, no holiday cards. But last week I got a text from my mother. Just one line: "Come home." It's about Valerie. Very important. Valerie is my younger sister, the golden child of the family. She's getting married to a wealthy man, and the reason my mother reached out was to ask if I could contribute $200,000 to Valerie's wedding. No, how are you? No apology for refusing to help with my college tuition all those years ago. If you've ever been the last pick in your own family, the one expected to sit quietly while they praised someone else like you didn't exist, leave a comment below. Like, subscribe, and join me as I uncover what they hid beneath the facade of family. Because what happened next wasn't pretty. I grew up in a 3-bedroom wooden house tucked away in the suburbs of Dallas, where the summers scorched your skin and the winters crept through the floorboards like ghosts. My father, Mark, was a retired firefighter with a bad back who spent most of his time fixing things in the garage, listening to country music and reading the morning paper. My mother, Patricia, ran a small bakery on the corner of Main Street, where customers called her Sweet Pat, and where I learned the value of keeping quiet when no one wanted your voice in the room. My sister Valerie was born to be adored. With hair like golden straw in harvest season and bright blue eyes that caught the morning sun, she could draw a smile from any adult with just one glance. She had a gift for ballet, once featured in the local paper after winning a state talent show in 6th grade. Every time she sang in church, entire pews would turn to watch. Me. I was different. I liked sitting by the window for hours reading about probability theory. I could break down our household budget at age 10 and helped Mom reduce ingredient costs by adjusting the flour-to-sugar ratio in her cookie batches. But no one called that talent. They said I was too logical, too distant, and not the sweet type of girl Valerie was. I still remember a night when I was 13. Valerie had just been chosen as the spring princess for our school festival, while I had placed top 3 in a middle school essay contest on the 2008 financial crisis. I brought my printed essay to the kitchen hoping someone would read it. Mom glanced at the pages and said, "Val was just picked as class rep. Don't you think that pink dress would look amazing on her?" I left the essay on the kitchen counter next to a fresh batch of cookies and walked away. No one opened it. At dinner, if Valerie mentioned getting an A, the whole table would cheer like we'd won the lottery. If I quietly said I'd won a scholarship in math, Dad would nod without looking up from the TV, and Mom would remind me not to say things that make others feel small. Phrases like "she's smart but not soft enough," or "Valerie is what a daughter should be," became the background music of my childhood. I learned to stay out of the way when they complimented Valerie. Learned to stay silent when Mom proudly showed the neighbor a photo of Valerie in her prom dress. Learned to mute my own dreams so I wouldn't disturb someone else's pride. The day I received a state scholarship to study finance, I held the letter in both trembling hands, imagining Mom smiling, Dad patting my shoulder and saying, "I'm proud of you." But when I held it out, Mom looked up from her baking tray and said, "So you're leaving the family then?" I stood there frozen. No congratulations. No smile. Just a single sentence filled with quiet accusation. I never told anyone that night I sat in my room listening through the crack in the door as Mom told Dad, "She's always been the type to walk away. Valerie would never do that." Dad said nothing. Just poured more whiskey into his glass, the ice clinking against the sides like little, deliberate verdicts. I folded the scholarship letter and put it in a drawer. I never brought home another achievement again. There were mornings when I got up early to make breakfast because Mom had fallen asleep after a long night baking. But when Valerie came downstairs, Mom would beam, call her my little angel, and say her smile alone made the kitchen feel lighter. I washed the dishes in silence. One Christmas, Valerie got a brand new iPhone. I got a gray sweater, tag still on, labeled winter clearance. Mom said, "You don't care about things like this, do you, Verona?" I nodded like always. I didn't resent Valerie. She never asked to be loved more. But she also never tried to share it. When kids at school mocked me for wearing last year's coat, she told me, "Try fitting in a little. No one wants to hang out with a robot." Eventually, I learned how to become a shadow. Not asking. Not appearing. Not speaking. And in the house I grew up in, I stopped feeling like I belonged. When I think about that old house now, I don't remember laughter. I remember the swish of Valerie's tulle skirt as Mom told me to move aside for a picture. I don't remember shared dinners. I remember trying to talk about becoming a financial advisor for nonprofits, only to have Dad interrupt. Why don't you think about being a bookkeeper nearby so you can still care for the family? I don't think hearts grow cold because of one single moment. They freeze slowly, layer by quiet layer, over years. Until there's nothing left but silence. And in that silence, I began rebuilding my dream. Alone. I still remember the day I got the email from Eastern Finance Institute. I read the words, "Congratulations, you've been accepted," over and over, afraid that blinking might make it disappear. I slid down in my chair, clutching the fabric of my sleeve, and for the first time in years I cried. Not out of weakness, but out of the overwhelming relief of finally being seen. I'd been accepted into 3 schools. Eastern Finance was my dream, the only one offering real-world investment training, something I'd dreamed about since I was 15. But to hold my spot, I had to pay an enrollment deposit, $15,000. Not the full tuition, just a commitment fee. I had a full ride for 4 years, but if I didn't pay on time, that offer would go to someone else. I spent the whole night researching loan options, trying to find a co-signer. But my application was denied because my parents hadn't reported their income properly. With no other options, I decided to talk to them. I still held on to a small hope that maybe just once, they'd see me as a daughter worth investing in. That evening, while we were having dinner, I chose to sit near Dad. Mom was slicing roast. Valerie was gushing about a photo shoot she had with her boyfriend in the school rose garden. I placed the printed email in front of Dad and steadied my voice. "I got accepted to Eastern Finance," I said softly. "I need to pay the enrollment deposit. It's $15,000. Dad looked up, his brow creased. "That much just to enroll? It's to hold my place. I already have a near full scholarship. But if I don't pay on time, I'll lose it." Mom glanced over and put her knife down. "15,000? We're not rolling in money, Verona. You know that." I nodded. "I understand. But I'm willing to sign a contract. I'll work. I'll repay every dollar. We can do it legally. I just need help holding this spot." Dad leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Valerie's getting braces. $17,000 for the full treatment. She needs it while she's still young. And you? Well, you don't need some fancy finance school to become a secretary or bookkeeper." I looked at him, speechless. Valerie stared at her plate. Mom sighed like I'd caused an inconvenience by asking. I spoke softly. "They teach portfolio management and risk analysis. I don't want to be an accountant. I want to be a financial advisor." My mother shook her head. "Why do you always chase after some far-fetched dream? You should study something practical. Close to home, easy to find work. Not everyone needs prestige or some fancy degree to live a decent life." I kept my voice steady. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I just need $15,000. I'll pay it all back. I swear." My dad got up, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and as he cracked it open, he said, "Your mom's right. Don't put the family in a tough spot just because of some big dream. Valerie needs us right now. Besides, who's to say you'll even land a job after all that schooling?" I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at them, slowly, one by one. Then I gathered the papers, folded them in half, and slid them into my backpack. "I'm sorry for the trouble," I said quietly. "I won't bring it up again." Mom kept eating, saying nothing. Dad turned on the TV. Valerie quietly pulled out her phone and started scrolling. No one looked at me. Not a single one of them. That night, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, feeling empty. I didn't cry. There were no tears. The only thing left inside me was a sharp, undeniable clarity. In that moment, I understood that if I wanted to live my own life, I'd have to do it alone. No leaning. No asking. No coming back for a second try. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I washed the dishes, wiped the table, cleaned the kitchen. Then I wrote a letter and left it on my bed. It said only one line. "I'll find my own way." I set out to find the one person I believed might understand. My grandfather. The man who taught me how to read stock value charts when I was 11. The man who never once told me I was dreaming too big. But that was another part of the journey. A different step on the path I had no choice but to carve myself. Because from that moment on, I stopped hoping that anyone in my family would ever choose me first. Not when they had the chance. And turned away. I left Texas on a gray autumn morning, the wind whispering through the familiar row of wooden houses. No one came to see me off. Valerie was still asleep in her room. Mom was busy packing pastries for delivery. Dad had left early to fix a friend's roof. I boarded a long-distance bus with one small suitcase, an old laptop, and exactly $1,200 in my account. But the most important thing I carried was a promise to myself. I would never let anyone look down on me again. Even if it cost me sleep, loneliness, or nameless years of struggle. New York greeted me with honking horns, rain-slick streets, and cold that slipped through every layer of clothing. I rented a tiny room on the third floor of an old house in Queens, just 2 blocks from the subway. The landlord was a widowed Haitian woman named Mireille, the first person in this unfamiliar city who smiled at me like I mattered. "Are you a student?" she asked as I struggled to drag my suitcase up the stairs. "No. I'm trying to get into finance," I replied with a small smile as if I wasn't even sure myself. I started out as a waitress in a little Italian diner in Midtown. My feet blistered from the stiff leather shoes, my hands went numb from carrying trays in the freezing cold, and my shoulders ached from the constant snide remarks from customers. But every time I counted enough tip money to buy a textbook, I reminded myself. This was the first step. Not a setback. A foundation. During the day, I studied basic investment courses for free at the public library. At night, I worked until late. After my shift, I returned to my room, opened my laptop, and studied until my eyes could no longer stay open. Some nights, I slept less than 3 hours, my head slumped over the desk, lectures still playing in my ears. I remember once, during a heavy snowstorm, the roads were frozen. I showed up 10 minutes late to my shift. Ryan, the manager, stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes glued to his phone, and said coldly, "You think this is college or something? You work whenever you feel like it." I apologized, bit my tongue, and kept working like I hadn't heard. But deep inside, I promised myself, one day I'll be my own boss. No one will get to look down on me just for trying. 3 years passed like a colorless stream. I worked 3 jobs at once, took advanced finance courses online, and signed up for every free networking event I could find. One night, I struck up a conversation with a middle-aged man at an investment seminar. His name was Harold, the head of HR at a private equity firm that was looking for interns. "I don't have an Ivy League degree," I told him plainly. "But I've got 3 years of real-world experience, a level 1 CFA certification, and enough market sense to know not everything is in the books." Harold studied me in silence. After a few seconds, he said, "This Monday, 8 a.m., 15th floor, 88 Hudson Street. Bring your resume." That was the first door. I walked through it in a thrifted suit from a Brooklyn market, with my hair tied back in a rubber band and rain-stained shoes. But I walked in with eyes more awake than anyone's. The first 3 months were brutal. I made coffee, filed documents, prepped meeting rooms, and scribbled down every word in investment briefings like they were gold. But every night I read more. I analyzed reports they never asked me to read. I emailed suggestions even when no one expected them. Harold called me into his office after 4 months. He said, "You're the only intern since last year I've never had to remind about anything. Do you want to stay on full-time?" I nodded, unable to hide how moved I was. For the first time, someone wanted to keep me, not out of family ties, not out of pity, but because I earned it. I was assigned a small portfolio of low-risk investment clients. After 2 quarters, returns rose 12%. I didn't celebrate. I quietly transferred a bit to my savings account and bought Mireille a new space heater. At 25, I was promoted to deputy risk manager. By 28, I became the youngest person to head a department at the firm, managing a portfolio worth over $300 million. I didn't brag. But one weekend, as I looked out from the top-floor office across the city spread like a living map, I smiled and thought, this, I earned. Piece by piece. No one gave it. No one gifted it. I bought a small apartment in Manhattan. Not big, but with an east-facing window that caught the morning sun. There was a bookshelf, a little coffee corner, and one single framed photo. Me and my grandfather when I was 8, sitting at the chessboard where he taught me how to play. Life doesn't shift in a single night. But each small step, every swallowed hurt, every rejection I tucked deep inside, That's what built the woman I am today. And even if I never say it out loud, I still carry one unanswered question inside me. If they had agreed to help me back then, would they still look down on me now? That evening, the New York air was cool despite the early summer. I chose a simple ivory dress, elegant yet modest, enough not to draw attention, but also not allow anyone to dismiss me. Valerie had sent the invitation a week earlier, saying the whole family would be visiting the city and would love to have dinner together. I nearly declined, but a part of me needed to know. Did they really want to reconnect, or was there something they wanted? I picked a small Italian restaurant near Manhattan, not too upscale but private enough. I arrived 10 minutes early, took a seat by the window, and ordered a glass of red wine. When they walked in, I stood to greet them out of basic courtesy. My mother wore a black designer-style dress, hair done in tight curls and heavy makeup. My father looked thinner, his shirt neatly pressed, his face tinged with unease. Valerie was glowing like she stepped off a bridal magazine cover, a soft white dress hugging her figure and a diamond ring so large it reflected the overhead light. "Oh, Verona," Mom began, her eyes scanning the restaurant before landing on my dress. "This place is lovely, subtle but refined. You chose well." I simply smiled, pulled out a chair for her, and signaled the waiter for water. Dad sat down, his eyes briefly meeting mine before darting away. Valerie couldn't hide her excitement. "So, where are you living these days? I heard you've got a place near Central Park." "Yeah, a high-floor apartment in the Elliott," I replied evenly without elaboration. Valerie raised an eyebrow. "Wow. I read somewhere those units are super expensive. You must be doing really well." I looked at her, clearly catching that her tone wasn't entirely warm. It was part awe, part calculation, like she was trying to confirm if I was worth leveraging. Less than 10 minutes after the appetizers arrived, my mother set her water glass down and shifted her tone to something noticeably softer. "Verona, sweetheart, I'm truly glad to see you doing well. Your father and I have always followed your journey, just that, well, everyone has their own pace in life." I said nothing. My eyes stayed fixed on her, waiting for what came next. Valerie folded her hands in front of her and continued gently, "Actually, the reason we invited you tonight, there's something important. I'm getting married. Thomas, he's a lawyer in Houston, works for a big firm, and his family's very traditional." I nodded. "Congratulations." My father took a sip of water, setting his glass down carefully like he was preparing for a negotiation. My mother cleared her throat. "The thing is, we wanted to ask if you could help out with Valerie's wedding. I mean, the groom's side has some pretty high expectations. Our side's portion is estimated to be around $400,000. Your father and I committed to covering half, but," she paused, tilting her head slightly, "at this point we really can't manage it." I set my wine glass down, my voice steady. "200,000? Valerie straightened her back, her eyes hopeful as if she expected me to say sure any second. My father jumped in. "Of course it's not a handout. It's a loan. You know how your mother doesn't want to appear inadequate in front of the groom's family. They're from a prominent circle. And, well, after the wedding, Thomas could help Valerie expand her network and maybe the whole family could." I interrupted. "So I'm the financial plan." Silence. I tilted my head and looked at each of them. 6 years. Not one message, not a single check-in. When I needed $15,000 to enroll, I was told Valerie needed braces. I was told I could become a secretary, that college was unnecessary. But now, $200,000 for a wedding is considered tradition. And I get invited here like a sponsor. My mother sighed. "Verona, you're misunderstanding. This is about family. You're the eldest. You should." I gave a faint laugh. "Don't talk to me about duty. Family isn't supposed to only remember you when they need something. I've survived these past 6 years on my own, through tears, blood, and sweat. None of you ever asked if I was okay. And now, just because I've succeeded, you think you can waltz back into my life and withdraw cash like I'm some walking ATM?" Valerie stared at me, her expression hardening. "You have the money. Clearly you're living comfortably. Why make a big deal out of something so small?" I nodded slowly, my tone dropping. "I have money. But that doesn't mean I'll throw away $200,000 just to patch up the hole in your self-worth that you and Mom left wide open throughout my entire childhood." My mother flushed red. "Don't be disrespectful in front of your parents." I looked at her, No anger, no bitterness, just a steady gaze. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm simply speaking the truth that you've all chosen to ignore. The waiter approached with the main course. I raised my hand politely to stop him, then stood up. My voice remained calm, like nothing that night had hurt me at all. I think this dinner has gone far enough. I hope the wedding is everything you expect. But if you're looking for money, maybe ask the one who got everything handed to her, from ball gowns to diamond rings, instead of the one you once told wasn't worth the investment. I picked up my bag and walked away in silence. Behind me, no one stood. No one called out. And that said more than anything they could have. I didn't walk away right after I stood. I lingered there at the edge of the table, in air so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. My eyes met my mother's. The same woman who once held me when I scraped my knee at 6, now looking at me like a failed investment plan. I asked her with a voice that no longer trembled, no longer hoped. So, when I asked for $15,000 to go to school, why didn't anyone help? She set her fork down, swirled her water, then looked up like the question wasn't even worth repeating. You didn't have the qualities for investment like Valerie has the qualities to marry into a legacy family. Don't compare the two. I couldn't tell whether those words made my blood run cold or lit something inside me. Probably both. Each word she spoke was gentle, yet pierced like icy needles. Valerie turned away, her face frozen as if hiding something heavier than shame. I drew a deep breath, straightening my spine. Qualities to marry, I repeated word by word. No sarcasm. No smile. That's our family's investment strategy? My father looked up, about to speak, but I didn't give him the chance. When I asked for money to go to school, you said I wasn't capable. Said I should be a secretary or a store clerk and stay close to home. Said Valerie needed braces and I was just chasing pipe dreams. Tonight, I'm invited to pour $200,000 into a lavish party. And the justification is that Valerie has the qualities to marry into a powerful family? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. But my voice cut sharp enough that all three of them looked at me. Really looked at me like I was flesh and blood, not just a shadow passing through their lives. I placed my napkin on the table, turned toward the door and pointed. Family shouldn't only show up when there's money to withdraw. I'm not a bank. I'm not paying a cent. No one answered right away. My mother's face stiffened, Valerie clutched her purse strap, and my father, the one who hadn't looked me in the eye all night, now stared down at his plate like the cold meat might give him an escape. I walked toward the door, every step deliberate. My heels echoed on the white tile floor. When my hand touched the doorknob, my mother's voice rang out behind me. No longer gentle, no longer pretending. You're so ungrateful. I turned back, not with rage, just disbelief at how easily she twisted blame. Ungrateful? I asked. Because I won't fund a wedding I was never invited to? Or because I survived without needing any of you? Valerie shot up from her seat. You don't understand anything. This is responsibility. It's sacrifice for family. Thomas is a man of status. You help us now, the whole family benefits later. You've always been distant, always thought you were better than everyone. I looked at my sister, the same one who laughed when kids called me a weirdo bookworm, who never once asked how I was surviving in New York. She was still performing, still clinging to a script so outdated she didn't even realize it was crumbling in her hands. I'm not distant, I said. I just stayed away from people who made me believe I didn't deserve help when I needed it most. No one said a word. I opened the door. The hallway light spilled into the dining room, casting gold across the faces that used to be familiar. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I stepped out into the night air. The wind stung my cheeks, but I felt light. Strangely light. As if I'd just severed a cord that had bound me in silence for years. The fury wasn't burning in my chest anymore. In its place was clarity. For the first time in years, I had no doubt I was right to walk away from them. Beneath the pale streetlights, I pulled out my phone and deleted Valerie's dinner invitation. Their numbers were still saved in my contacts. Mom, Dad, Valerie. But I no longer saw a reason to keep them. Those calls were never connection. They were echoes of old expectations, demands from people who only saw me when they needed a walking wallet. I got home just before midnight. The high-rise building was still lit up from the upper-floor apartments. I stepped into the elevator and caught my reflection on the stainless steel wall. A 30-year-old woman, hair neatly tied, eyes steady. Not overly glamorous, not trying too hard. But it was me, whole, self-made, owing nothing to anyone. When the elevator doors opened on the penthouse level, I walked into my small apartment. The glass of wine I had poured that morning still sat on the table. I didn't drink it. I just pulled out a sticky note and wrote a single sentence. Real family doesn't demand sacrifice. They remember everyone without needing to be told. I stuck the note on my bedroom mirror, turned off the lights, and slept peacefully. Not because I had refused them, but because I had finally rejected the way they treated me. I thought everything would quiet down after that dinner. I thought a firm, clear refusal, paired with silence cold as steel, would be enough to close the door they tried to shove open. But I had underestimated one thing. Pride, when wounded, can become the most brutal weapon someone uses against their own family. Just a week later, I got a message from Courtney, an old friend from high school who still lived in my hometown. It came as I was driving home from a meeting with my investment team. Verona, your sister's telling people at church that you refused to help with the wedding. Your mom's saying you're rich now but live alone with no one around and don't know how to value family. Are you okay? I stopped walking. My eyes fixed on the screen. I didn't reply right away. A burning sensation crept up my throat, not from anger but from a bone-deep exhaustion. They weren't stopping. They had no shame in twisting the truth, painting me as the cold-hearted villain in their version of the story. That night, I typed Valerie Ellis into the search engine. By the third result, a headline popped up: Bride rejected by her own sister. When blood isn't thicker than money. The article was published by a small news outlet in our old town, where my mother once befriended the editor while selling baked goods to the newsroom. I clicked the article. The words danced in front of me like knives sharpened with wounded pride. Valerie Ellis, a music teacher and familiar face in the local community, shared that her wedding may need to be scaled back after not receiving financial support from her successful sister currently living in New York. I don't blame her, Valerie shared tearfully. I'm just saddened for our family, and for the bond one thought we had as sisters growing up. Below was a side-angled photo of Valerie, blonde hair gently falling, church window light catching the fake tear glistening in her eye. I recognized the photo. It was taken 3 years ago at a charity concert I had anonymously donated to through an intermediary organization. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, my hand gripping the arm of the chair. They were rewriting the story without the truth, without me, just a polished version for the public. They didn't care what I had been through. They just needed a villain to preserve their image of decency. The next morning, I mailed an envelope to the newspaper. No return address. Inside were 3 documents: a photocopy of the full scholarship I received at 18, the tuition loan rejection letter from my parents signed by both of them, and a magna cum laude diploma from the Eastern Institute of Finance, stamped in red. No explanation. No note. No rebuttal. The truth, when clear enough, needs no defense. 3 days later, the article vanished from the homepage. A new piece replaced it, titled "The Importance of Honesty in Family Narratives." No names, no pictures, but the message was crystal clear. Courtney texted again. What did you do to get them to pull the story so fast? Valerie's furious. Your mom still talks about it every Sunday. I didn't respond. I just sat in my living room, hot tea in hand, watching the morning light paint thin gold ribbons across the city skyline. No one likes being misunderstood. But I'd learned that sometimes silence is the only way to preserve your dignity. I didn't need the town to believe I was right. I only needed to know I wasn't wrong. They had put my reputation up for sale. They used twisted narratives to shield their bruised pride. But I no longer lived by their stories. I lived by the years I picked myself up, started over, and walked forward without anyone holding my hand. And when I thought about it, I didn't feel anger anymore. Just relief. Because maybe the best revenge is walking away in silence and letting them listen to the emptiness of their own echoes. It was a regular Tuesday night. I had just finished showering, hair wrapped in a towel, when my phone started vibrating nonstop. The name on the screen gave me pause. Logan Pierce. We had been in the same final-year finance cohort, part of a regional market research group, and kept in occasional contact since graduation. Logan was quiet, precise, a man of few but weighty words. I didn't answer the call, but within a minute the messages came pouring in. Verona, you need to see this now. It can't wait. The next message was a photo. Then a brief caption. His real name is Evan Graham. He was sued for identity fraud in Miami 2017. Attached was a scanned legal document, pulled from Florida's court system. I sat down, heart racing. I zoomed in on the photo. There was no mistaking it. That was the man sitting beside Valerie that night, his arm draped around her like she was something valuable he owned. His face looked almost exactly like the one in the court file, except now with darker hair and thin-rimmed glasses masking the familiar features. The third message came quickly after. They changed names, but fingerprint systems don't lie. My job is to screen business partners for a major Houston investment family. He tried to approach their daughter but got turned down. Now, it's Valerie. I leaned back in the chair, ceiling lights blurring as my eyes welled up. I was speechless. Part of me wanted to ignore it. They had mocked me, belittled me, denied my worth. They chose Thomas, now Evan, as the symbol of the social class they aspired to. If that was the price they paid, why should I intervene? But the other part of me, the one that sat beside Valerie when she had a fever and was too scared to take her medicine, the one that drove her to school in the rain when our parents overslept, the one that hid her essay to keep her from getting scolded, whispered back. Valerie has no idea. She doesn't deserve to lose her future to a con man. I texted back, Logan, are you sure? Less than a minute later he called. Absolutely. We've already flagged him to other partners. But since this is personal, I don't have the authority to step in. You're the only family member who can stop this before it goes too far. I thanked him, hung up, and sat silently in my apartment, the wind hissing lightly through the windows. Every passing minute tore at me. If I spoke up, I'd face denial, maybe even hostility. No one in the family would believe me. They'd say I was jealous, bitter, making things up to ruin the wedding. I could still picture my mother's face when she said Valerie had what it takes to marry into wealth. They had staked everything, pride, hope, fantasy, on this marriage. If I brought it crashing down, even with good reason, I would become the final thorn they'd decide to rip out completely. But if I did nothing, Valerie would marry a man who had stolen identities, scammed widows out of money, and vanished after fancy weddings in 4 different states. I pulled up Evan Graham's file again. He had used the name Christopher Allen in Boston, Mark Sullivan in Charleston, and Robert T. Hayes in Miami. Each time he married wealthy women, drained their assets, and disappeared within 6 months. I didn't sleep that night. I read every line in the documents Logan sent. I called an old colleague now working in federal insurance, asking for confirmation through a legal name change database. Everything matched. Thomas was Evan Graham. Valerie had no clue she was about to marry a financial predator. Near dawn, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. No email. I wanted Valerie to feel the weight of every word. Valerie, you might not believe me. You might think I'm doing this out of jealousy or because of old wounds. But the only thing I truly want is for you not to destroy your life for someone unworthy. The man you're about to marry, his real name is Evan Graham. He was sued for identity fraud. He has married 3 women under fake names and disappeared with hundreds of thousands of dollars from their accounts. Attached is the evidence. If you choose to ignore this, I won't reach out again. But if you want to know the truth, just call. I don't want your thanks. I don't need your forgiveness. I just don't want you to be the next victim. I printed 3 copies of the documents, neatly folded them into an envelope, and sent it to the Texas home address via express delivery with signature confirmation. After sending it, I didn't wait. I didn't check my phone. I didn't track whether it was signed. I just continued with my work as if everything was now in the hands of some justice I no longer controlled. I didn't know how Valerie would react. I didn't know what my family would do when the truth came out. But I knew one thing: I hadn't turned my back. Not this time. Not on the truth. And that was the only thing that kept me from lowering my gaze in the mirror. I sent the envelope on Monday morning using express mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. No message, no note. Just the documents, photos, and extracts from the Florida State Court. Every detail was accurate enough to crush any rosy dream Valerie might have been holding on to. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't ask if they had read it. I didn't watch for any calls from unknown numbers. I went back to the office, continued working, meeting clients, signing contracts. On the surface, everything was as normal as if I had never exposed a lie that was about to walk down the aisle. 2 weeks later, on what should have been the wedding day, I received an email from the flight booking system notifying me that a charter flight scheduled to take the Ellis family and close friends to Napa Valley had been cancelled. I knew why. Still, I checked the town news schedule out of habit. And there, in the social section of the local paper, was a brief line typed hesitantly: "The wedding of Valerie Ellis and Thomas Rawlings postponed due to personal reasons." No one mentioned the truth. No one dared touch the name Evan Graham. But behind the scenes, in whispered conversations at the hair salon or grocery store, I knew the news was spreading in ways Valerie couldn't control. That afternoon the calls started. First my mother. For calls in 5 minutes. Then my father. Then a landline number from my grandmother's house, where I used to call during holidays as a first-year student. I didn't answer. Not one of them. I sat in the living room, holding a cup of tea, the golden afternoon light bathing the cool tile floor. The phone kept ringing. But I let it ring. Because I knew they weren't calling to check on me. They were calling to blame. I imagined the old house scene. Valerie sitting on the sofa, eyes red and swollen, gripping the engagement ring that was now just proof of a delusion. My mother pacing angrily and confused, while my father stood leaning against the doorframe, silent and speechless. All three, instead of grateful that I had saved them from disaster, only saw that I had ruined the biggest plan of their lives. I wasn't angry at them anymore. Not hurt. Just sad. Because even though I chose silence, civility, didn't publicly humiliate them, didn't accuse or demand apologies, they still chose the same response: blame, fault-finding, denial. That night I drove to the suburbs, to the small white house where my grandparents lived. They didn't know I was coming. I didn't call ahead. But when I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on. My grandfather opened the door wearing an old gray sweater and the wool scarf my grandmother had knitted last winter. "Verona," he said, surprised. "You came home without calling?" I smiled and hugged him. "I wanted to surprise you." My grandmother came out from the kitchen, still holding her apron with flour on her hands. "Goodness, have you eaten? Want some stew?" I nodded, tears suddenly welling up, not from sadness but from feeling moved. Only these two, all these years, never needing me to be brilliant or beautiful, just needing me to show up. They had given me $100 the day I left Texas, wrapped carefully in a yellow envelope, tucked inside an old coat pocket with a small handwritten note from Grandma. No one starts from zero when they still have family. We ate a simple dinner: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. Grandma told stories about the neighborhood. Grandpa asked about work. No one mentioned Valerie. No one asked why I had come on that exact day. They knew but didn't say. After dinner I pulled out 3 plane tickets. I booked it. 10 days in Europe. Italy, France, Spain. I hired a guide, picked hotels near the squares. "I'm covering all the expenses." My grandmother's eyes widened. "Verona, you don't have to spend so much." I took her hand. "I want to. Because thanks to you I have today. I want you to see the world, not through the TV but through the window of the very train you're riding. Through the smell of croissants in Paris mornings. Through the bells of Florence churches. I want your old memories to have color." My grandfather grasped my shoulder, eyes glistening. "We don't need it. But thank you for not forgetting." I smiled. "I'll never forget. No matter what anyone says, writes, or spins. I remember clearly who was the only one to believe in me when no one else did. And that was enough. No one needed to say more. No one needed to mention the calls I refused or the cancelled wedding. In that small kitchen, there were only the clinking of spoons against teacups, the aroma of baking apple pie, and 2 aging hearts warmer than anything I ever got from the house called family. News of the cancelled wedding spread faster than any social media post. No longer whispers behind backs at Sunday church. Now it was the main story the town I grew up in wouldn't stop talking about. Those who once proudly bragged about knowing the Ellis family now avoided mentioning our name like it was something shameful. 1 month after what should have been Valerie's wedding day, my mother's bakery was forced to close. She had taken loans to expand the shop, preparing to cater the post-wedding receptions that never happened. Bills piled up, contracts canceled, and all pre-orders requested refunds. No one wanted to order a wedding cake from someone whose fiancé was just exposed as a scammer who stole hundreds of thousands. My father, The same man who once told me I wasn't practical enough to live on my own had to take a temporary job at a glass installation workshop outside of town. I knew this because one morning a former industry contact sent me a photo of him loading glass into a pickup truck. He asked, "Verona, is that your dad? Looks just like him." I replied with one word, "Yes." Valerie disappeared completely from social media. No more selfies in fancy coffee shops. No more stories about wedding dress fittings or floral arrangements. Her profile turned into a blank, empty space, as if Valerie herself wanted to erase her existence from that story. I didn't seek her out or spy. I thought after everything she needed space to face what she had believed. As for me, I returned to work. Calm, steady. Step by step, I put into motion a plan I had long dreamed of but never shared with anyone but myself. A small scholarship fund named after my grandparents, the Alice Grace Fund, for Dreams Left Behind. I chose that name because I wanted it to symbolize both what I lost and what I gained. Alice is my family name and Grace, my grandmother's name, the only person who never left me even once. Every year, the fund awards 15 scholarships to high school students with strong academic achievements but no family financial support to continue to college. Each receives exactly $15,000, the very amount I once asked my parents for and was denied. I want every child, no matter where they come from or what their circumstances are, to walk through college doors without having to sacrifice their dignity begging for family support. The day I signed the decision to establish the fund, I printed out a handwritten letter, written in my own handwriting, not sent by email, not through an assistant. I wrote it to my parents, not to demand justice, but to close a chapter that had quietly burned inside me for 10 years. Parents, back then I needed $15,000 to live my own life. I didn't receive it. But today I can give that to 15 children every year. Children who were once rejected, told their dreams were unrealistic. Maybe you still think I'm ungrateful, greedy, cold. But I've learned not to live by those labels anymore. Family to me is not the place I left. Family is what I have rebuilt with kindness, with trust, and with the losses you left behind. Verona. I signed it, folded it, placed the letter in a plain white envelope with no return address. I wasn't sure if they would read it. But I was certain of one thing. This time I was the one writing the final chapter of the story. And I wrote it with the calmness of someone who has stood alone on a crowded street, with no one by her side and never turned back. What would you think if one day the very people you call family became the biggest barrier to your dreams? If every rejection, every disdainful look, became the fuel to rise and keep walking alone? I chose silence instead of revenge. I chose kindness instead of bitterness. And I chose to live my life with hands and a heart that no longer expect anything from those who once turned their backs. What about you? If you've ever felt abandoned by your own family, standing between two choices, forgiveness or letting go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share your story in the comments, because sometimes what we go through is not just pain, but what helps someone else find their own way out. Don't forget to like and follow the channel to walk with me through honest stories about family, choices, and growth, things that might bring tears but also enough to make you smile because you made it through.